Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt your worries melt away? Or experienced the opposite, entering a space that immediately made your anxiety spike? What if I told you that ancient Buddhist masters discovered a secret so powerful, it could transform any space into a sanctuary of peace, regardless of its size, your budget, or your current living situation? Today, I'm going to reveal 5 life-changing techniques that monks have used for over 2,500 years to create spaces of profound tranquility. One of these methods is so simple yet powerful that it transformed my students' lives within just 3 days of practice. And the best part? It takes less than 10 minutes to implement. But before I share these transformative practices, let me tell you a story that changed my entire understanding of sacred space. This story isn't in any books. It was shared with me by my teacher in a small monastery tucked away in the mountains of Japan. Picture this. A successful CEO named James had spent over $100,000 creating what he thought would be the perfect meditation room. He imported rare artifacts, installed special lighting, and even had a feng shui master design the layout. Yet despite all his efforts, he couldn't find the peace he was seeking. Frustrated and desperate, James traveled to Japan to meet with a renowned Zen master who lived in a simple mountain hut. The moment he entered the master's humble dwelling, James felt a profound sense of peace he'd never experienced in his expensive meditation room. Confused and humbled, James asked, "Master, how is it that your simple space feels more peaceful than my perfectly designed room?" The master smiled and asked James to sit down. Then she did something unexpected. She served tea in a cracked old cup. "Why do you use a broken cup?" James asked. The master's response would change James's life forever. She said, "Before I share the master's profound answer, which completely transformed how James and later, hundreds of my students, approached creating peaceful spaces, I want to tell you something important. I've created a free guide called the 5 Sacred Space Secrets that includes detailed instructions for all the practices we'll discuss today, plus 3 bonus techniques that I won't have time to cover in this video. You can download it using the link appearing on your screen now. Now, back to the master's response, which reveals the first crucial principle of creating truly peaceful spaces. The master lifted the cracked teacup and said, "This cup is like space itself. It's not perfection that creates peace, but how we pour our awareness into it." James sat in stunned silence. In that moment, he realized he'd spent years trying to buy peace instead of learning how to cultivate it. This brings us to our first transformative technique, what I call the practice of sacred awareness. But before I share this practice, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the same room can feel completely different depending on your state of mind? This isn't coincidence, and understanding why is the key to transforming any space into a sanctuary. The first technique, the practice of sacred awareness. This practice has 3 essential components that most people completely miss. I'll share each one, and then reveal how they work together to create something truly remarkable. The foundation of presence begins by choosing one room or area in your home. It doesn't matter how small or imperfect it might be. One of my students, Margaret, transformed her entire life by practicing with just a tiny corner of her kitchen. Here's what happened to Margaret. As a grandmother living in a small apartment with her daughter's family, she thought creating a peaceful space was impossible. There was always noise, always movement, always something happening. But using this first component of sacred awareness, she discovered something extraordinary. "I realized," she told me, "that peace doesn't require perfect conditions, it requires perfect attention." Here's the exact practice Margaret used. Choose your space. Even if it's just a corner. Sit there for exactly 3 minutes, use a timer. Notice 3 things you've never noticed before. Repeat this at the same time each day. Simple? Yes. Powerful? Absolutely. But here's where it gets interesting. The power of intention. This is where most people go wrong. They think intention is just about deciding what they want. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us something far more profound. Think of intention like planting a seed. The seed needs 3 things to grow. The right soil, your chosen space. Regular nurturing, your daily practice. Clear direction, your specific intention. Let me share a powerful story that illustrates this perfectly. In ancient China, there were 2 artists known for creating extraordinarily peaceful gardens. A wealthy nobleman hired both to create gardens on his property. The first artist spent months importing rare plants, building elaborate structures, and arranging everything according to precise calculations. The second artist did something entirely different, and the result was so remarkable that it changed how Buddhist temples approach sacred space forever. But before I reveal what the second artist did, which is something you can easily replicate in your own space, let me share something special with our viewers. I've created a detailed video guide showing exactly how to implement these practices in different living situations. It's called Sacred Space Mastery, and as a thank you for watching this far, you can access it at 50% off using the code appearing on your screen now. Now, let's return to our story and discover the second artist's secret, which leads us to the third component of sacred awareness, the secret of the second artist. The second artist spent the first week doing something that seemed strange to everyone watching. Instead of planning or building, he simply sat in the empty garden space. For hours each day, he would sit, observe, and occasionally walk slowly through different areas. When asked what he was doing, he said, "I'm letting the garden teach me what it wants to become." This brings us to the third and most powerful component of sacred awareness, the practice of deep listening. Most people try to force their space to become something specific, but true sacred space emerges from a dialogue between you and your environment. This is what Buddhist masters call living wisdom. Here's how to practice deep listening in your own space. Morning practice. Enter your chosen space in complete silence. Stand or sit quietly for 3 minutes. Notice the natural light patterns. Feel the flow of air. Listen to the subtle sounds. Pay attention to your body's response. One of my students, Sarah, an 86-year-old widow, used this practice to completely transform her relationship with her home. For years after my husband passed, she told me, I couldn't find peace in our house. Every room held memories that seemed to overwhelm me. But after just 1 week of deep listening practice, something remarkable happened. Sarah discovered that her space wasn't just full of memories. It was supporting her in ways she'd never noticed. Now, before we move on to the second major technique, I want to address something I can hear many of you thinking. This sounds great, but my space is too noisy/cluttered/small/busy for this to work. Let me share a powerful truth that Buddhist masters have taught for centuries. The size of your space doesn't determine its sacredness, your relationship with it does. Consider this. Some of the most profound Buddhist teachings came from practitioners living in caves or tiny huts. They discovered something that modern science is just beginning to understand. Our experience of space is created primarily by our awareness, not by the space itself. Sarah's breakthrough came on the 8th day of her practice. As she sat in her living room during her morning deep listening session, she noticed something she'd overlooked for years, the way the early morning light created patterns on her wall, just like it had when her husband used to sit in his favorite chair. Instead of bringing sadness, this observation brought a profound realization. The space wasn't holding on to grief, she told me. It was holding memories of love. I just needed to learn how to listen differently. This brings us to our second major technique, sacred space alignment. And before I share this transformative practice, I have something special for those of you who are deeply resonating with these teachings. I've created an exclusive meditation audio called Sacred Space Journey that pairs perfectly with these practices. You can access it free using the link appearing on your screen now. Now let's explore sacred space alignment, a practice so powerful that it can transform even the most challenging environments into havens of peace. The 3 pillars of sacred space alignment. Physical alignment. Most people think this means arranging furniture according to complicated rules. But Buddhist wisdom teaches something far simpler and more profound. It's about creating what masters call pathways of peace. Here's how to implement this in your own space. Identify the natural paths you take through your space. Remove obstacles that interrupt your flow. Create what Buddhist practitioners call pause points. Let me explain pause points, because this concept transformed how hundreds of my students experience their homes. A pause point is any spot in your space that naturally invites you to slow down and become present. It might be a window with a pleasant view, a comfortable chair position just so, a small altar or peaceful image, a place where light falls beautifully. The key is to create these pause points along your natural movement patterns. This way, moments of peace become integrated into your daily life, rather than something you have to make special time for. Energetic alignment. This is where traditional Buddhist wisdom offers something remarkably practical for modern life. Instead of trying to control energy, we learn to work with it. Think of your space like a river. Energy flows through it naturally. Our job isn't to dam the river but to guide it gently. Here's a simple practice to begin working with energy in your space. The 3-point energy scan. Stand at the entrance to your room. Notice where your attention naturally goes first. Observe what areas you tend to avoid. Feel which spots invite you to linger. This simple awareness practice reveals the natural energy patterns in your space. Once you understand these patterns, you can work with them rather than against them. Consciousness alignment. This is where most spiritual teachings fall short, but it's where Buddhist wisdom truly shines. Your state of consciousness is the most powerful force in creating sacred space. Think of it this way. Have you ever noticed how a room feels different after an argument? Or how a space seems to glow after a moment of joy? Nth. Remove one unnecessary item. Seasonal rhythms. This is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of sacred rhythms. Your space should breathe with the seasons just as nature does. Let me share the seasonal practices that transformed my students' spaces throughout the year. But first, I want to address something many of you might be experiencing. The feeling that maintaining these practices year-round seems overwhelming. Here's a powerful truth. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. Let me show you how to adapt these practices naturally through the seasons. Seasonal sacred space practices. Spring. Season of awakening. Transform your space to mirror nature's renewal. Open windows daily for fresh energy. Move objects to create new perspectives. Add living plants or fresh flowers. Use lighter colors and textures. One of my students, Margaret, had a beautiful realization during spring practice. I used to think spring cleaning was about tidying up, she said. Now I understand it's about awakening possibility. Summer season of expansion. Create cooling energy flows. Use natural light mindfully. Practice outdoor meditation. Bring nature's elements inside. Autumn. Season of release. This is where the Buddhist practice of mindful letting go becomes especially powerful. Create a simple release ritual. Choose one area to declutter mindfully. Thank each item before releasing it. Create space for inner reflection. Add warming elements to your space. Winter. Season of rest. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that winter isn't just about staying warm. It's about nurturing inner peace. Here's how. Create cozy meditation corners. Use candlelight for morning practice. Practice silence more frequently. Focus on restful energy. Before we move to our final major technique, I want to share some exciting news. We've created a comprehensive seasonal sacred space guide that includes detailed practices for each season. As a viewer of this video, you can access it at a special discount. The link is appearing now. Now let's explore our fifth and most profound technique, the practice of sacred integration. This is where everything we've learned comes together in a remarkable way. The practice of sacred integration is what I consider the crown jewel of Buddhist space transformation. It's where all our previous practices merge into one seamless flow of peaceful living. Let me share a remarkable story about Dorothy, an 88-year-old student who felt overwhelmed by all the practices until she discovered the integration method. I was trying to remember too many separate things, she told me. But then you showed me how to weave them together naturally, and everything changed. Here's the exact method Dorothy used to integrate all our practices. The sacred integration method. Start with one core practice. Choose your anchor practice, the one that resonates most strongly with you. For Dorothy, it was the morning blessing. She began each day with 3 conscious breaths, simple blessing words, 1 mindful action. Add through association instead of trying to remember multiple practices. Link new ones to existing habits. Before morning coffee, space blessing. While washing dishes, gratitude practice. Before watching TV, energy clearing. Before bed, peace pause. This method follows the Buddhist principle of natural unfoldment, allowing practices to grow organically rather than forcing them. Let me share something crucial here. Many of my older students found that trying to maintain multiple practices was causing stress, exactly what these techniques should prevent. The integration method solved this problem beautifully. The 3 levels of integration. Physical integration. Connect practices to specific locations. Create visual reminders. subtle ones. Establish natural pause points. Temporal integration. Link practices to daily activities. Create rhythm without rigid schedules. Allow for natural flexibility. Spiritual integration. This is where the magic truly happens. Instead of doing separate practices, you begin to live in sacred space consciousness. Before I share the integration techniques that will bring everything together, I want to reveal something that most spiritual teachers never mention: the power of imperfection in creating sacred space. Let me share what happened with my student June, a 92-year-old woman who thought she was too old to start these practices. Her story will likely surprise you, and it reveals a truth about sacred space that changed everything for our community. June lived in an assisted living facility with limited control over her environment. She couldn't make major changes to her room, couldn't burn candles, and had to work around caregiver schedules. "I almost gave up before I started," she told me. "But then you shared the 3 truths of sacred space that changed everything." The 3 truths of sacred space. Perfection blocks peace. Perfect conditions aren't necessary. Imperfections can become allies. Challenges often become doorways. Small changes create big shifts. June's breakthrough came when she added one family photo with intention, created a simple morning greeting, established a 3-breath practice. Consistency trumps complexity. Instead of elaborate rituals, June focused on brief moments of awareness, simple touchpoint practices, gentle daily remembrance. Now, before I share June's complete transformation story, I want to offer something special to those of you watching. We've created an essential sacred space kit, specifically designed for those with limited space or mobility. You can access it using the link appearing now. June's story continues with what she calls her miracle morning. One day, about 3 weeks into her practice, June's miracle morning wasn't marked by dramatic changes or supernatural events. Instead, she experienced something far more profound: a moment of complete peace in the midst of her facility's normal morning chaos. Here's what happened. During her usual hectic morning routine, with caregivers rushing about and other residents calling out, June automatically engaged in her simple 3-breath practice. In that moment, she realized something extraordinary. The noise was still there, she told me, but it no longer disturbed my peace. I had found what you called my inner sanctuary. The inner sanctuary method. Create your personal anchor. Choose one simple practice. Link it to a daily moment. Practice regardless of conditions. Build your peace foundation. Start with 30-second practices. Gradually extend duration. Allow natural expansion. Develop sanctuary awareness. This is where June's practice became truly transformative. She learned to notice peace in small moments. Find quiet within noise. Create calm through presence. At this point in our journey together, you might be wondering how to bring all these practices into your daily life. Let me share the exact implementation plan that worked for hundreds of my students. The 21-day Sacred Space Journey. Week 1 Foundation. Day 1 to 3 Morning Blessing only. Day 4 to 7 Add evening practice. Focus on consistency over perfection. Week 2 Expansion. Day 8 to 10 Introduce touch points. Day 11 to 14 Add space clearing. Build confidence gradually. Week 3 Integration. Day 15 to 17 Combine practices naturally. Day 18 to 21 Develop personal style. Create sustainable patterns. Let me share the detailed day-by-day guide that has helped countless students successfully integrate these practices. But first, an important announcement for those who are deeply connecting with these teachings. We've created a special Sacred Space implementation program that provides daily guidance and support through your journey. As a thank you for watching this far, you can join at our founders rate using the code on your screen now. Now let's explore the detailed implementation guide. Days 1 to 3 Foundation Building Morning Practice. Wake up 5 minutes earlier than usual. 3 conscious breaths. Simple morning blessing. 1 mindful action. Remember Maria, our 84-year-old student? She transformed her mornings using just these simple steps. "I thought I needed elaborate rituals," she said. "But these small practices changed everything." Days 4 to 7 Evening integration. Add to your morning practice. 3 gratitude moments. Simple space clearing. Evening blessing. Days 8 to 10 Touchpoint development incorporate mindful moments, doorway pauses, mindful transitions, brief centering practices. Here's where most people encounter their first challenge: remembering to practice. Let me share the simple solution that worked for Sarah, our 89-year-old student who lived alone. The Remember to Remember method. Place subtle reminders, small objects at touch points, gentle visual cues, natural transition markers. Create practice triggers. Link to daily activities. Use environmental cues. Follow natural rhythms. Days 11 to 14, sacred space expansion. Begin working with room-specific practices, energy awareness, spatial relationships. Days 15 to 21, full integration. This is where everything comes together. Combine practices naturally. Develop personal style. Create sustainable patterns. Now let me share something powerful that happens during the full integration phase. This is where most of my students experience what we call the sacred shift. The moment when these practices stop being something you do and become who you are. The sacred shift typically occurs around day 18 to 21. Let me share the signs to watch for. Signs of the sacred shift. Peace becomes your natural state. Practices flow effortlessly. Your space begins to influence others. Challenges become opportunities. Before we move to our final practices, I want to share one last story that beautifully illustrates this transformation. Eleanor, a 91-year-old widow, had lived alone for 15 years when she started these practices. Her greatest challenge wasn't implementing the techniques. It was believing they could make a difference at her age. Her breakthrough came on day 19. Here's what she wrote to me. This morning I realized something had changed. My apartment feels different, alive somehow. But the real miracle isn't in my space, it's in me. For the first time in years, I feel truly at home. Final implementation steps. The morning integration. Wake with gratitude. Perform your chosen practices. Set daily intentions. Create mindful moments. The daytime flow. Practice touchpoint awareness. Maintain energy alignment. Respond to space signals. Adjust as needed. The evening completion. Review and reflect. Clear and bless spaces. Set peaceful intentions. Prepare for rest. Now before we close, I want to share something special. We've created a complete Sacred Space Mastery program that includes daily guidance, personal support, advanced practices, community connection. As a viewer of this video, you can access it at our special founding member rate. The link is appearing on your screen now. As we approach our closing ceremony, let me share the most important truth I've learned in my years of teaching these practices. The greatest sanctuary isn't found in perfect conditions, but in a peaceful heart. Let's complete our journey together with a final integration practice. One that brings everything we've learned into a beautiful completion. The Sacred Space Completion Practice. Stand in your chosen space and follow these steps. Gratitude acknowledgement. Take 3 deep breaths and silently thank your space for supporting you, yourself for taking this journey, all beings who share your path. Peace activation. Speak these words of blessing. In this space, peace dwells in my heart, peace grows in all directions, peace flows. May all beings find such peace. Final integration. Touch something in your space mindfully. Feel the connection between your heart and your environment. Allow peace to settle naturally. Remember, this isn't the end of your journey. It's just the beginning. Every day brings new opportunities to deepen your practice and expand your peace. Before we part, let me share 2 final gifts. First, I've created a special Sacred Space Journal that will guide you through your first 30 days of practice. You can download it free using the link below. Second, we're offering a limited number of spaces in our Sacred Living community, where you'll receive ongoing support and guidance. Use the code PEACE2025 for special access. Final words of wisdom. Remember that your space is always speaking to you. Learn to listen with your heart. Allow peace to flow naturally. Trust the process. And most importantly, know that every moment offers a new opportunity to begin again. Thank you for sharing this sacred journey with me. May your space become a true sanctuary of peace, and may your practice benefit all beings. Until we meet again, may peace be your constant companion.